I'd like to start by asking an open question to all of you. You may answer one or the two of them, but just following from the main points discussed on the previous conversation with Mr. Trudeau. So we are living in a world where sanctions, trade barriers, and economic coercion is growing. We saw the US military intervention in Venezuela recently and the real threat of Greenland's sovereignty. Which is a test to EU's strength and even the relationship with the US. Decline on some US soft power metrics, as we've seen in the presentation earlier today. So just would like to start with your view on what is the role of soft power in this context, how it matters. So that's first part of the question. And another one is, can those short-term potential gains from hard power actions justify any potential long-term damage to a country's soft power and reputation? Maybe I would start with Ambassador Kuman, please. Just conscious of your time.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, look, thanks for inviting us here. And actually, thank you in particular for this report. It's a really powerful and hugely influential report. It's one that we read a lot, and I know it's one that countries around the world read a lot, and I know that your audience will value it as well a lot. In terms of the role of soft power and is it still relevant, I absolutely think it is. I mean, it's been said earlier today, perception drives behavior, and it's not just it drives reality. In fact, I would say perception drives behavior, but reality also helps drive perception. Right? It's very hard to have strong soft power if there isn't something real that sits underneath it. And so I think what you're also seeing here is the ability of countries to communicate their relative strengths, which is absolutely true. As for sort of why soft power and its benefits over a short run versus a long run, I mean, I think in the long run, soft power is the only option. You always need a balance. It's not an either or. You will always need a balance of soft and hard power. But soft power is cheaper, it's more effective, and it's more aligned with our values, in particular as the UK. It's cheaper because, I mean, armed conflict and militaries cost a lot of money. I mean, building a brand can cost a lot, but nowhere near the amount as of the cost of military force. It's more effective because it is always better to win over hearts and minds, for people to trust you, to win over an argument through logic and reason, than to do it through force. There's a quote that used to sit on the side of the courts of justice in my hometown, and it said, "If we are able to uphold the law, it is because it first resides in the hearts of the people." And I always sort of love that. You can't uphold the law unless people on some level believe it, and they believe it's true. And soft power is absolutely vital to being able to not only communicate your message, but for people to believe you. I mean, we just heard former Prime Minister Trudeau talk about how many lives were saved in the pandemic because people trusted the Canadian government, and the government had that soft power. And that is something that I think will always remain. So it's more efficient. And in terms of aligned to values, I mean, for the UK, force is always a last resort. As I said, you always need to have both soft and hard power, but it is always a last resort. And to that extent, it's one of the reasons why we invest so much in this as the UK.
Thank you. Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much for this question. And I think Poland is a great example of this dilemma between soft and hard power in a very, very brutal world. And I mean brutal in our neighborhood particularly, because, of course, the biggest danger for world peace now is still Russia, in spite of all other big nations' threats to small nations, because Russia is killing each week hundreds and probably each month thousands of Ukrainian citizens. And if you heard about Poland recently, in a year or two, you probably heard that Poland is investing 5% of our GDP in hard power, so in defense. We have the biggest number of tanks in Europe. Soon we will have the biggest number military drones, military vehicles, military ships, etc., etc. We want to have our borders secured. But the reason why actually it wasn't shown, but as far as I know, we are one of the few Western or European countries which actually in the Global Soft Power Index this year advanced, and we are now number 30, is what we built in terms of soft power in the last decades. First is economy. We used to be a very poor country, especially in European standards. But we are a country in which we didn't have a recession in spite of the COVID year 2020 since 1991. So 35 years of constant economic growth. We had the biggest economic growth in the world, actually number 2 after China. Our export quadrupled in the last 20 years between 2004 and 2024. Our export quadrupled. But so these are all, we are more and more visible, and our brands are more and more visible on especially European market, but not only European market. Our companies are also reaching out to Asia, Middle East, Africa, etc. But second part of the Poland gaining power, soft power, in image of a successful country, and I'm not ashamed to say a just country. Of course, we are not a perfect country, but we are comparing to the model. Competitive model being built in our neighborhood by Russia. We are really a just country. In Poland, you do not have 1% of the richest owning 1/3 up to one half of economy like in Russia. It's a much smaller number. The differences between rich, big cities and small rural communities are not as big as east of our borders in Belarus or Russia, or Ukraine, for example. And we also stood for what we were found on, so solidarity and freedom. When we joined European Union in 2004, we always supported actively other nations to join EU since. The Balkan countries, the Baltic countries first, the Balkan countries, and now, of course, Ukraine and Moldova. And the climax of what our nation, not our government, any government, but what our nation showed in terms of solidarity and human kindness was 2022. So 4 years ago, after this huge wave of refugees from Ukraine reached our borders, in Polish homes, not in Polish hotels or state institutions, but in Polish homes, up to 3 million of Ukrainian refugees, mostly women with children, were hosted, some of them for 3 days, some of them for 3 weeks, but some of them for 3 years already. I want to come to the conclusion. Hard power, what we are doing now, so investing in basically defense, secures your borders. But to gain relevance, you need soft power. So you need values, and you need growing, sustainable, what Mr. Trudeau just said, and just economy. And society which is, as we are for Ukrainians, for example, an example of success.
Thank you, Minister. Professor Martwala.
Thank you very much for for inviting me. I am the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. And one of the things that we are seeing happening now with the rise of hard power is the undermining of multilateralism. And of course, we are taking it for granted, but I think one of the biggest success of multilateralism is that we have not had a world war for 8 years. And I don't think that would have been possible without effective multilateralism. It wasn't perfect, but it was absolutely important. There cannot be effective multilateralism unless there is abundance of soft power. I think this is very, very important. And therefore, when soft power is eroding in one corner of the world, we all have to be concerned. Of course, we have to be even more concerned if these are powerful countries with plenty of hard power that can be misused to undermine other countries. Then the second issue, we have common problems. The issue of climate change is actually not something to be undermined. I come from South Africa. Right now, my place is seeing the floods that have never been seen before. Last year, I'm based in Tokyo. The temperatures measured were the highest ever measured. And it is simply not possible that we can be able to deal with common problems without soft power. We are just coming out of the COVID-19, and everybody will agree with me that sharing of data between countries in a transparent manner would have actually made us navigate that crisis better. And that would not be possible if there is no soft power in abundance. There's also the issue of technologies that cross borders without much regulations, that require all of us to collectively come together. Of course, last year at the General Assembly, or the year before last, the Pact of the Future and its recommendations around the governance of artificial intelligence, for example, would not be possible at the international level without soft power. I come from the African continent, and conflicts, we tend to think of conflicts being in one country. But if you come from the African continent, you will know that they actually cross borders. And much of these conflicts that we see in the Great Lakes, that we see even closer to South Africa in northern part of Mozambique, is because the issue of we have not sufficiently invested in soft power. So it is clear now that the case is good for soft power. I think the big question is, how do we collectively think together so that we can be able to incentivize countries to invest in soft power?
Thank you very much, Ms. Migachi.
I think if you look, in a world that you can very well wake up and end up paying twice as much money to buy a car because of tariffs, and in a world where you could wake up and pay up to 40% inheritance tax on an asset that you own, or up to between 20 and 40% income tax, I think stability becomes the most important currency for soft power. And I heard the mention of COVID-19 in many instances today in the speech of the Honorable Mr. Trudeau, just now on the panel. And I think if I recall the days of COVID-19 in the UAE, the three words we always heard from the president of the UAE were, La tshillun hem, don't stress out. And really, the effect the soft power we saw from just those 3 words, in my humble opinion, we're seeing on the ground as businessmen, as companies, corporates, individuals in the UAE, in Dubai, in the real estate market. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed just announced a few days ago the record-breaking results of the real estate market. I'm a real estate developer. We closed almost $1 trillion dirhams worth of transactions, a historical number. And I think that lends itself to the soft power of the UAE, of the Dubai real estate market, consistently delivering on what we say, building monumental architectural wonders. Speak of the pyramids, and in Egypt, and then compare that or juxtaposition that against Burj Khalifa in Dubai. I remember growing up in Dubai as a child and seeing that being built, and the area around Burj Khalifa was a desert. We saw camels there. And today, you have one of the busiest, most bustling downtowns in the world. And to me, that's soft power. I'll probably end with a very short, humorous anecdote. I was traveling the other day, seeing a friend abroad, and we were in the car, and I asked his son, he has a 7-year-old son, I asked him, what do you enjoy more? You enjoy your time here at home or in Dubai? And he said, in Dubai, without a second thought. And I told him, why is that? And he told me, because the roads are not broken. And to me, I laughed, and to me, that was the best form of soft power being perceived by a 7-year-old child. The roads, the infrastructure, soft power, right? We didn't tell that child, love us in Dubai. He loves Dubai because of that. So I think, you look at architecture, real estate, infrastructure, soft power can play a very powerful role. We're seeing it on the ground in Dubai. We just crossed the population of 4 million people right out of COVID. So I think the role of soft power played a very integral role in making Dubai and the UAE a leading nation across many nations in today's world.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up with a question to Ambassador Ayed. So as a diplomat based in Geneva, of course, you're naturally proponent of rules-based international system to ensure, peace. So how, with some powerful nations now exiting some of those institutions, or at least, some declining trust in those institutions, how do we keep those rules in place? So what is the role of soft power in keeping those rules in place, given this context?
So, look, I think the multilateral system and the rules-based international system is vital. And it's very simple why. In a world without commonly accepted rules and norms, might makes right. It's really simple, right? So you have to have a rules-based international system. The more support that has, the better. But it is never going to get everyone's support all the time. It's never in the whole history of time had everyone's complete 100% support all the time. In fact, a big part of my job in Geneva is all countries come with a slightly different view of what those rules should be. We all want something slightly different out of it. And the whole point of international Geneva is to negotiate and find a way through. Now, at different points of time, different countries will engage more and less. But actually, for the UK, it's absolutely vital, and we are going to encourage people to lean in, and we will always be there. And there's still a huge critical mass of people there. You're referring to certain countries sort of exit from certain institutions, but even this year alone, what we've achieved in things like the WHO with the pandemic agreement last year was phenomenal, right? People said that sort of agreement wouldn't be possible, and these are rules and norms around how we save each other's lives the next time and it's not an if, it's the next time there's a global pandemic. And so I'm hugely confident in the importance of that system still. It's how your mobile phones work in every country in the world. The ITU sets those rules. It's how air traffic control can talk to each other. It's how we have rules around international humanitarian law. So the UN is a very, very big thing. The USG will know this more than anything else. And often the high-profile things you see in the papers are the things that are challenged more. But there is so much that just works day in, day out, and day out. And yes, we as countries and member states need to use some of our soft power to back it. And the UN has its own and needs to get out there and use that as well. But the source of that soft power has to come from credibility and some reality. I sort of said before, perceptions drive behavior, but reality also drives perception. In the UK's instance, we're still top 5 in the league tables. We have been for many, many years. And that comes from the reality of having 4 out of 10 of the world's top universities still in the UK. We have over 50 current sitting heads of state and government who were educated in the UK. Whether it's the Premier League or whether it's Wimbledon in terms of support, in terms of sport, whether it's the 1 trillion tech industry, which is third only to the US and China, there is a reality there that builds the brand. And that is absolutely important. And as diplomats, your job is to build that brand, but then we have to use that brand, right, to support real things, to support institutions like the UN. And that is absolutely part of my job, not only to build the brand, but to use it for good.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Related question on technology to Professor. So, as mentioned now, soft power is multifaceted. We are speaking about international relations, culture, business, education, and innovation. You have dedicated your career to leveraging innovation and technology for the good and the advancement of the Sustainable Development Goals. There is a lot of discussion going on now about techno-feudalism and some important technology and wealth being concentrated in the hands of a small number of nations that could or it could be used as a form of hard power. So what is your advice on how nations could navigate that landscape?
No, I mean, I think the big issue about technology is how do you regulate greed? How do you regulate? How do you deal with a world where power is being concentrated into very few private individuals with private objectives and perception of the world, which might not necessarily be in line with the principles of the international rule of law? I think this is what it is all about. And of course, that is where regulations comes in. And I think a very important issue, especially in the new technologies that we see here, is how do we get international frameworks? Some of them will have to be international, some of them will have to be within member states, to ensure that while individuals are pursuing the maximization of profit, human rights are not undermined. While people are pursuing their own individual dreams, the international peace order is not undermined. And for us to be able to do that, we need to deploy soft power. We need to come together, whether it is at the United Nations, whether it is at the European Union. I have seen some very impressive way in which they are dealing with issues of technology. The EU AI Act is a good example. And again, while we are doing it within a member state, we should also bear in mind that we are connected. So if we do not have a global view, then we are going to leave loopholes which will undermine what we are trying to achieve.
Thank you. It's okay. Thank you so much. How to achieve that?
Well, I think we should do it. I think we should absolutely do it. I think we need to firstly agree on what are the values that are going to drive this. And of course, for me, I think the issue of safety is important, safety and security. I think the issue of fairness is important. I think the issue of fair treatment and so on and so forth is important. Then the second issue is we need to change the behavior of people. whether they are the people who are in the production of technology or the people who are in the use of technology, and education is actually quite critical in shaping the behavior. And then I think the third thing that we need to do is actually to create incentive schemes so that peoples and organizations do the right things. I think fourthly, we need to have policies and regulations. Now you're getting into the hard part of enforcement. And I think we need to have standards. We need to agree on standards. And these standards must cross borders. And the digital standards, the International Telecommunication Union is doing a fantastic job to make sure that the standards are harmonized. Because if they are only done at member states level, then you have harmony issues, and because you have trade, then it becomes a complicated issue. And then I think we need to have institutions that are going to drive all these things that I've talked about. Some of these institutions must be at the national level. And the UAE is doing a fantastic job at that. Some of them will have to be at the international level. At the Pact of the Future, we have agreed on the International Scientific Panel on AI, which is going to meet every year and evaluate what needs to be done.
Thank you. Minister, you spoke about a few successes of Poland in the last decade or so. What is your advice for other developing nations that would like to follow the path of Poland, also in the context of soft power?
To put long story short, to build a growing economy in which not only a few benefit from the growth. This is absolutely crucial. And Poland, because of many factors, strong trade unions, this very notion that Poland's independence and freedom came from the working people uprisings in the 1980s. We certainly were able to build a very, very successful economy. As I said, none other nation other than China grew as much economically in the last 35 years as Poland, but also quite, not perfectly, but quite just society. But I'd like to come back for a moment to what was said before about how to maintain and promote the liberal and consensus-driven, dialogue-driven world order. Because I think this is absolutely crucial for today. For today's world, which is more and more driven by naked military power, as presented by Russia, or the threat of power, of using the military power, as presented by other superpowers. And I think the crucial thing is we need to better educate our societies and to promote the very notion that cooperation-based world order benefits nations, each and every nation, more than very brutal, very naked competition, whether it uses military power or, for example, economic wars. I'm sorry that the ambassador of UK just left because, you know, the choice of Great Britain, of United Kingdom, is the best example of it. They chose because of nationalistic mood, because of the influence of the division showed in internet 10 years ago, that they want to leave the bigger cooperation-driven entity, which is European Union. And they are in every aspect worse than they were 10 years ago, in every aspect. To the extent that if the current trends continue, Poland will be richer in terms of GDP per capita and the standard of living than United Kingdom within 5 to 10 years. Cooperation and the concept that it's better to mitigate unavoidable different interests between countries and states and nations by consensus and by dialogue rather than by economic or military force is absolutely crucial, and we need to promote it better, not only in Europe but worldwide.
Thank you. Mr. Bingacci, in terms of global uncertainty, like the one we are living now, capital become cautious. So how important is the national image in sustaining investor confidence when economic fundamentals alone are not sustaining?
I think one of the most important drivers for our market, for the real estate market in Dubai, from my experience, has been consumer confidence. And we've seen that across the board. I'm in a very lucky position to be both an architect and a real estate developer. And we're the company behind the first Mercedes-Benz city in the world. We launched it 5 days ago in Dubai. And when you talk about real estate, generally people get bored. It's not the most exciting topic, not as exciting as football, FIFA and all of that. But to be able to bring in 23,000 people from all around the world to witness the launch of a real estate project, which is what we did for Mercedes-Benz City, I think that's the purest manifestation of soft power being seen through the lens of consumer confidence. So I think consumer confidence has always been there in the UAE in general because of stability, because of predictability, because of the clarity of legislation. We have a legislation that is very clear. I'll give you an example as an entrepreneur myself. I was sitting negotiating a very large deal in a different country, and my first question to them, they were telling me, we want you to do another branded project like you've done with Bugatti, with Mercedes-Benz and all of that. And my response was, can I sell to different nationalities? Because I heard there's no freehold law. And they told me, it's going to come, it's still not here. And my answer was, well, until it's here and I can sell to everyone, I'm going to stick to Dubai. So I think it's very important to consider things like consumer confidence. It's what makes or breaks a market. And we've seen that. We've seen it again in COVID-19, in the crisis. Everybody chose to flock to Dubai, to buy real estate in Dubai, to invest in Dubai, to set up their companies, bring their families, because in the end, you trust the system. The best healthcare in the world, the best economic institutions in the world, the best legislation in the world. And so I think that's ultimately the purest form of soft power being manifested in an economy, and ultimately for us as companies and individuals to succeed.
Thank you. Yeah, just coming to an end, I'd like to close with a question to all of you, and it's touching on the idea of the fight for climate change. So in this year's soft power study, investment in green energy and technologies increased the importance overall, following what Mr. Trudeau was talking about, especially with China and Japan improving their performance on that aspect. But the fight for climate change is slowing down in some parts of the world, or at least the discourse is. The number of violent conflicts have been rising, to levels of the highest levels, since the Second World War. So is soft power, how do we use soft power now to improve cooperation? Is this enough to move us faster in building more resilience and planet resilience, really?
the sustainability of the world economy is absolutely crucial because of the challenges which Professor just described. And I'm so happy that finally Poland is also catching up. Poland used to be, for historical reasons, mostly coal-driven country. Our energy up to the 1990s, also because of the communist system, was 80% coal-driven. Now we have not only days but weeks in which solar and wind are producing more than coal-based energy supply. The diversity, Justin Trudeau told about diversity as a philosophical complex, but diversity in economy is also absolutely crucial. In the sources of energy, of course, everybody, I think, who is responsible will say that this is absolutely crucial. But also in terms of growth, diverse economy is a model of or recipe for success, and Poland is another example of that. Yes, we are very much dependent on cooperation with the heavy industry of Germany, but in spite of that, we have a thriving agricultural sphere with export eightfold bigger in the last 20 years than in 2000 or 2005. We have a very robust IT economy, especially the gaming industry. If anybody of you plays The Witcher or Punk Frost, these are Polish games, and Polish economy is the second after France. Gaming economy is number 2 in European Union after France, generating 1.5 billion of dollars revenue a year. We have textile, we have shoes, we have food processing. It's in today's very fragile economy. It's very unprudent to be dependent on one part of economy. For growth, you also need to have your economy very diversified.
I think, from our experience, the reason I'm such a firm believer in the power of soft power is because I've seen it personally as a businessman in our business. If you asked me, how did our sales look a couple of years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago, the split was 80% sales to the local market, 20% to the international market. Today, post-COVID, I would answer you and say almost 65% international and 35% local. And why is that? I think half the job is done by the ecosystem, by the model, the soft power model that was established by the UAE. Today, if you look at Abu Dhabi, for example, it's become a beacon and a center for AI. We have a ministry for AI in the UAE. We have a ministry of tolerance and coexistence. Talk about soft power and inclusion, right? So anyone who's coming into the UAE, businessman, politician, whoever you are, any type of individual coming in doesn't feel alienated. And so I think there's much more powerful ways to achieve inclusion, a reduction of alienation, economic improvement by the use of soft power tools. Maybe I'll close off with this. Even the most hard examples of hard power in Arabic culture perhaps, is Antara. Antara was a poet and a warrior, and he had a famous quote. He used to always say, "I strike the weak such that the strong shall fear me." So it's almost like using a softer version of harder power. So always softening the power. And I think this has always been an inherent part of our culture, the Arabic culture in general, is to always practice soft power to become more relevant to the entire world.
Professor Mawala.
No, I think in conclusion, I think it is important for us not to give up. At this time, when multilateralism is in retreat, when issues of climate change, proven science around climate change is being undermined, when issues of territorial integrity are being undermined right in front of our eyes, when the international rule of law there is a force to make it the international rule of the jungle, which will be dangerous for all of us. It is very important to build confidence, as Trudeau talked about, because all these issues will not be resolved without us collectively dealing with them. This is not the worst of time. I'm reminded of Charles Dickens when he says it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. This is by far not the worst of times. These are challenging times, but we have within our arsenal, we have institutions that already exist. We have people with knowledge, much more literacy than we have ever seen before, that we can be able to tackle these issues. I will end by quoting one of the leaders of Africa when he said, "Forward ever, backwards never." And I think this is the spirit in which we should move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Michalski, Professor Mawala, and Mr. Mingati. Thank you so much.